We believe that this policy will help the state of New Hampshire to decrease its energy prices, grow carbon-free energy in the state and other energy projects, that it will drive local investment and create jobs, especially in the North Country, while also improving grid stability and resiliency throughout the state and within New England ISO. Uh, One of the major factors when you're considering job growth today is how to attract new businesses and new manufacturing to your state. And one of the most important factors for new industry and new manufacturing is the price of power. And in New Hampshire and across New England ISO, the price of power is somewhat unreasonable for most new manufacturing to take foothold. Also, traditional energy systems today are not well equipped to help the state of New Hampshire overcome this roadblock. So we believe that microgrids can help by providing a unique solution and a new path for New Hampshire to be able to overcome this roadblock and attract new generation while avoiding the traditional costs that may be overly burdensome in order for a new manufacturer or a new job creator to come to the state. This is done by creating microgrids that will be within these microgrid zones. And the purpose of them is to help new manufacturing and energy producers to work in tandem. The product of this policy and the implementation of it will be more business and more jobs here in the state, but that's not the only positive component that microgrids can offer through this policy. Once connected to the traditional energy infrastructure in the state of New Hampshire, these microgrids can also balance and act as an emergency reserve system during peak demand. This will help to keep prices down during peak demand by increasing the available supply to ratepayers and the traditional energy infrastructure. And it will also reduce the need for costly and often carbon-intensive electrical infrastructure that is used to support the grid during these peak demand moments, as you all saw recently during the winter storm. Microgrids are not a relatively new concept. They have been around for decades, but they are growing in popularity as states and regions look for new ways to reduce their energy prices in order to attract new business. A similar policy was introduced and passed and implemented in the state of West Virginia in September. That state was able to attract new generation and a $500 million investment to a rural area of the state. New Hampshire now faces a similar opportunity, only this policy goes a step further to ensure that all ratepayers and all buyers of power benefit from the growth of microgrids here in the state, regardless of whether or not they reside within the microgrid or microgrid zone itself. This is accomplished by providing the downward pressure on rates through the demand response component that is included within this policy and is the one major differentiating factor from the microgrid policy that was passed in West Virginia and implemented there in that state. There are various other positive benefits from this policy, and I'm happy to go over them with you, but I would urge the committee to vote yes on this bill. And thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Good presentation. Welcome. And I'll open it up to a couple of short questions. Representative Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are the fuels that are envisioned that might be used? The technologies and the fuels. What's going to fuel these microgrids?
It's a great question, Rep. Reynolds. Thank you so much for that. It's an important question to consider when you're talking about the growth of microgrids. What type of fuels might be considered or used? We believe that we should be somewhat tech neutral or tech agnostic or energy agnostic in the growth of these systems, and that the implementation should be left up to the Department of Energy and the states that make the decisions on what type of fuel source should be used. The policy does, though, take a look at and consider, what type of fuel source will be used in the implementation process.
Representative Noel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Is there an interconnection problem for a microgrid? Is there some additional equipment that needs to be brought in to define the microgrid?
That's an excellent question, Rep. Noel, and thank you for asking it, because we specifically lay out the interconnection process in the policy itself. Microgrids are typically plagued with two major problems. One is that in order to deal with the excess or lack of energy on a microgrid, they have to acquire a grid interconnection. Unfortunately, grid interconnections are extremely expensive and are plagued with regulatory burden and take a significant amount of time. So oftentimes microgrids do not get built. However, with the advent of high density flexible loads, microgrids can become somewhat self-regulatory or self-efficient, and they do not require a grid interconnection, as was typically important in the past for the systems to operate functionally. And so now the policy recognizes the advent of these new technologies and lays out a path where those that want to build a microgrid and new generation and attract new jobs and investment can do so once they build the microgrid or once they start to apply for it. They must apply for grid interconnection to be connected to the main grid, but they're not required to have that grid interconnection at the moment they start building their operations. However, if there is at some point a grid interconnection that does get built, the grid itself, the microgrid itself, would have to perform demand response back to the traditional grid, and that's where the component of grid resiliency comes in.
Representative Harrington for our last question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I won't actually ask a question other than who can I speak to about the bill, because I have so many questions on this that it would take me an hour to go through them right now. So who's the right person to talk to after this so I can answer my questions?
I think that's a great question. Yeah, there's probably several people that would be good to talk to. I'm happy to stay afterwards and discuss with you, and I think also Representative Ammon, and then various other people like my policy director. If you need really narrowed down details, I'm happy to put you in touch with him as well.
Thank you, because there's a lot of terms in here that I'm